Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. This week we have another EDH gameplay lined up just for you guys. This week I'm playing Daretti, Scrap Savant. First time to the channel, Phil is playing his Endrek Sahr, Master Breeder. Fred is playing his Sidisi, Brood Tyrant. And Kevin, who's also new to the channel, is playing Karlov, the Ghost Council. For openers, I keep 2 mountains, Sequestered Stash, Ancient Tomb, Reliquary Tower, Planar Bridge, and Draw Scorpion. Kevin keeps a hand with Knight of the White Orchard, Scoured Barrens, Stoneforge Mystic, Disenchant, Swamp, Temple of Silence, and Land Tax. Phil keeps a hand with 4 swamps, Evolving Wild, Myojin of Night's Reach, and Damnation. Fred's opener is Cyclonic Rift, 2 forests, Swamp, Breeding Pool, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Shallow Grave. Kevin wins the die roll, so let's get into it. For the first turn of the game, Kevin plays Temple of Silence, scrying the top card and keeping it on top. He passes to Fred. Fred plays Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and passes to me. I play a mountain and pass to Phil. Phil plays Evolving Wilds and cracks it for a swamp before passing to Kevin. Kevin plays a swamp, casts Stoneforge Mystic, and in response, Fred casts Vampiric Tutor, taking 2 to find a card and putting it on top of his library. Kevin also gets to search his library thanks to Stoneforge and finds Skull Clamp and puts it into his hand. With nothing else, he passes to Fred. Fred plays a Breeding Pool tapped and passes to me. For my turn, I play another mountain and pass to Phil. Phil plays a Myriad Landscape and passes back to Kevin. For Kevin's turn, he casts Karlov and then plays Scoured Barrens, gaining 1 life, and Karlov gets 2+1/+1 counters. He then moves to combat and attacks me for 1 with Stoneforge Mystic before passing to Fred. Fred plays a forest for his turn and casts Phyrexian Arena before passing to me. For my turn, I play Ancient Tomb and take 2 to cast Daretti. I then uptick Daretti, pitching a mountain and draw Scorpion to draw 2 cards. With nothing else, I pass to Phil. Phil doesn't have much to do and plays a swamp before passing to Kevin. Kevin also plays a swamp and casts Whip of Erebos. This spells trouble for the rest of the table and he moves to combat, swinging it Daretti to kill him. Kevin gains 5 life and Karlov gets 2 more counters. With nothing else, he passes to Fred. For Fred's turn, he takes 1 damage from Phyrexian Arena during his upkeep to draw a card. He then plays a swamp and casts Oracle of Moldiah, playing Mana Confluence as his second land for turn. For my turn, I play a mountain and Vandal Blast Kevin's Whip as quickly as I can. I then cast Jester's Cap and pass to Phil. Kevin tries to convince Phil that in addition to Myriad Landscape forcing him to find the same type of basics, the basics have to share the same art. However, Phil does not appreciate this. For his turn, Phil plays a Barren Moor tapped and casts Filth before passing to Kevin. On Kevin's turn, he casts Knight of the White Orchard during his first main phase to find Scrubland, then casts Land Tax and Skull Clamp. He equips the Skull Clamp onto Stoneforge Mystic and moves to combat. He swings Karlov at Fred and Stoneforge at Phil. Both Phil and Fred declare no blocks and take the damage. With nothing else, Kevin passes to Fred. On Fred's upkeep, he once again takes 1 from Phyrexian Arena to draw an extra card. During his first main phase, he casts Sidisi, Brood Tyrant, hitting a creature in the 4 that he mills and getting a zombie token. He then plays a forest and Crypt of Agadine tapped. He then casts Exhume, taking 1 from Mana Confluence, and brings back Kira, Great Glass Spinner, and I get back Draw Scorpion. With nothing else, he passes to me. For my turn, I play Sequestered Stash, and I crack Jester's Cap to hit Fred's library. I take Seedborn Muse, Jin Gitaxis, and Vornaclex, all troublesome creatures that I do not want Fred to cheat into play. Still during my first main phase, I cast Blood Moon and take 2 from Ancient Tomb. I then move to combat, and I swing Draw Scorpion at Phil, who chump blocks with Filth. With nothing else, I pass to Phil. For Phil's turn, he plays a Swamp and casts Damnation, and Kevin gets to draw 2 cards from Stoneforge Mystic dying. On Kevin's upkeep, he gets to go find some lands thanks to Land Tax, and he finds 3 mismatched plains. He then plays one of those plains and casts Thraben Inspector and investigates. He equips the clamp onto his inspector and passes his turn, discarding a plains at the end of his turn. Fred's turn is pretty quick and he takes 1 from Phyrexian Arena again, before moving to his first main phase to cast Ulvenwald Hydra to find an island. With nothing else, he passes to me. For my turn, it's pretty quick as well, and I play a mountain and tap out to cast Planar Bridge, taking 2 from Ancient Tomb. Phil plays a swamp for his turn and casts his general, Endrek Sahr, Master Breeder. He passes turn. At the end of his turn, Kevin cracks his clue token to draw a card. For Kevin's turn, he plays a plains and casts Bygone Bishop, and then plays Mother of Ruins. Bishop triggers and Kevin gets to investigate. He moves to combat, swinging Thraben Inspector at me for 2 damage, and with nothing else he passes. On Fred's upkeep, he once again takes 1 from Phyrexian Arena, and he moves to his first main phase, playing Opulent Palace. He then casts Havengul Lich, and casts Life from the Loam but has no targets in his graveyard, so the spell just goes to the bin. With nothing else, he passes turn. For my turn, during my first main phase, I take 2 damage from Ancient Tomb to recast Daretti. I uptick my commander to pitch a land and draw a card. For his turn, Phil plays Terramorphic Expanse as his land drop, and then casts Myojin of the Night's Reach from his hand. He gets 8 1/1 Thrall tokens and has to sacrifice his commander. With nothing else, he passes turn. During Kevin's upkeep, land tax triggers and he goes and finds a plains. He then planes the plains and recasts Karlov to get a clue token. He then casts Kaya and uses her second ability, draining all of his opponents for 2 and gaining 2 life. In turn, Karlov gets 2 +1/+1 counters, and with nothing else, Kevin passes to Fred. Fred plays Blooming Marsh as his land drop, and he moves to combat. He swings his Ulvenwald Hydra at me for 10 damage. During his second main phase, he activates Havengul's Lich's ability to cast Oracle of Moldiah from his graveyard. He plays an island off the top and reveals Erebos. Before the end of his turn, Fred Cyclonic Rifts Daretti back to my hand, taking 1 from Mana Confluence. On my turn, at the end of my draw step, Phil removes the Divinity counter from Myojin of the Night's Reach. Fred responds by putrefying Kevin's Skull Clamp, and we're all forced to pitch our hands except for Phil. I choose to put Daretti into my command zone, and as I have nothing else to do, I'm forced to pass my turn. During Phil's first main phase, he casts Read the Bones, and takes 2 life to scry 2 and then draw 2. He chooses to put the 2 cards on the bottom of his library and draws 2 new cards. He then plays a Swamp and moves to combat. Thanks to Filth, Myojin kills Kevin's Kaya and Fred gets hit by 5 Thralls. During his second main phase, Phil casts Phyrexian Totem and passes to Kevin. Kevin draws for his turn and casts Sensei's Divining Top. He then activates the top to reorder the top 3 cards of his library, and sacrifices a clue to draw one of the cards. That card happens to be Blood Artist, and he casts it before passing to Fred. For Fred's turn, he replaces the draw effect from Arena to dredge life from the loam. He then draws for his turn and plays a Swamp. He activates Havengul Lich to cast Kira, Great Glass Spinner, and moves to combat, swinging the Hydra at Phil. Phil chumps with a Thrall, and Kevin drains Phil for 1 and gains 1, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on Karlov. For my turn, I draw a card and cast Scarecrow before passing to Phil. For Phil, during his main phase, he activates Phyrexian Totem, then swings with everything but 2 of his Thralls at Kevin. Kevin tops at the end of Phil's turn, and reorders the top 3 cards of his library. During Kevin's upkeep, he responds to his land tax trigger by cracking a clue to draw a card. He then uses the trigger to find 2 plains in a swamp, and draws for his turn. Kevin then plays a plains, and casts Falconwrath Noble before moving to combat. During his combat step, he swings Bygone Bishop at Phil for 2. With nothing else, he passes to Fred. During Fred's upkeep, he uses Genesis to return Kalitas to his hand, then takes 1 from Arena and draws a card. For his first main phase, he casts Burgeoning, then casts Life from the Loam again. Moving to combat, he swings the Hydra at Phil once more, and Phil chumps with a token again. This time, Kevin drains Phil with Artist and Noble, gaining 1 life twice, and Karlov gains 4 counters. For my turn, I really don't have much going on for me. I draw a card and cast Voltaic Key before passing to Phil. Phil plays a Foil Cabal Coffers, which at this point is just a very expensive mountain, and activates the totem. He moves to combat once again and swings everything at Kevin. Kevin responds by topping and reordering the top cards of his library. During Phil's second main phase, he casts Dark Ritual, then drops Hecatomb, sacrificing his 4 Thralls. Kevin drains Phil for 8, gaining 8 life, and Karlov gets 16 +1/+1 counters. At the end of Phil's turn, Kevin sacrifices a clue to draw a card. During Kevin's main phase, he casts a Johnny Steadfast, and Phil responds by tapping a Swamp to ping Blood Artist. With Blood Artist dying and the triggers on the stack, Phil kills the Falconwrath Noble, and the end result is that Phil gets drained for 3, Kevin gains 3, and Karlov gets 6 +1/+1 counters. Kevin upticks a Johnny Steadfast, targeting Karlov to give it +1/+1, Vigilance, First Strike, and Lifelink. He then casts Sword of Light and Shadow and equips it onto Karlov. Moving to combat, Kevin swings Karlov at Phil, and Phil responds by killing Bygone Bishop. Unfortunately, Karlov proves too much for Phil, and 34 commander damage takes him out of the game. Kevin gains 34 life, and Karlov gets a +1/+1 trigger. Sword of Light and Shadow triggers, and Kevin gains more life, and Karlov gets another +1/+1 counter, and he gets to return Stoneforge Mystic to his hand. With nothing else, Kevin passes to Fred. Fred takes 1 damage during his upkeep to draw a card, then draws for turn. He recasts his general, but unfortunately whiffs on the milling, hitting no creatures. Moving to combat, Kira swings at a Johnny for 2, Fred has no plays during his second main phase, and he passes to me. At the end of Fred's turn, I activate Scarecrow to bring back Kuldotha Forgemaster. For my turn, I play Thespian Stage, then tap Forgemaster, killing Voltaic Key, Planar Bridge, and its self-defined artifact. About 10 seconds into my search, I realize what a huge mistake I've made by killing the Voltaic Key. Had Key still been on the field, I could have gotten Never Njal's Disc and been able to reset the board. Instead, I decided to go the Mindslaver route and hope that I can wipe the board with Kevin's cards in hand. With the legendary artifact now on the field, I sacrifice it to take Kevin's next turn. For Kevin's turn, I draw a card and I cast Stoneforge Mystic to go find Loxodon Warhammer. I cast it and I equip it onto Karlov and then move to combat. I swing everything at Fred and I kill him. Unfortunately, after combat's done and Kevin's gained a bunch of life, I realize I can't de-equip Karlov and exile itself. With all hope resting on me drawing a board wipe, things are looking bleak. For my turn, I draw a mountain and I scoop it up to Kevin. Game review time. Karlov was a really interesting commander to see. Usually life gain doesn't do super well in EDH, but in this case it did a lot of work. I've often found that life gain cards get pushed away as 21 commander damage is enough to seal the game no matter what, but Karlov really wants to run a critical mass of these effects. Kevin did a great job of navigating the board, and I think he still would have won regardless of had I been able to reset the board. Phil's deck was really sweet, and I got to see a lot of black cards I don't typically see. Hecatomb in particular is a card that I'm really interested in jamming into a few decks, as being able to tap swamps to ping for 1 damage seems like a really powerful effect. This was probably one of the few games where Fred was able to cast Sidisi on curve. He has monumental bad luck, or at least when I've played against him with the deck, and he's often stuck on lands. Daretti did well, but unfortunately losing my hand and having to cast my commander for like 11 mana was not really what I wanted to be doing. It also didn't help that I misplayed with the Voltaic Key, but I really didn't have a hand or much of a graveyard at any point in this game. Please be sure to tune in every Monday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video, with a second video popping up sometime during the week. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta, or check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below or in the About section. As always, thank you guys for watching, and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.